My castaway this week is the actor Cate Blanchett. She grew up in Melbourne and is arguably the most celebrated actor her home country has ever produced, appearing in more than 70 films and over 20 theatre productions, playing everything from Elizabeth I and Bob Dylan to the elf leader Galadriel in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Jackson was so reluctant to let her go, he wrote her into the Hobbit trilogy too. Other directors under her spell include Martin Scorsese, Guillermo del Toro, Steven Soderbergh and Spielberg, David Fincher, Wes Anderson and Todd Field, who wrote her latest Oscar-tipped film, Tar, just for her. She's won acting awards by the dozen. To give you some idea of the numbers, the performance in Woody Allen's Blue Jasmine that clinched her second Oscar earned her 39 other prizes, including a Golden Globe and BAFTA. As herself, however, she tends to play things down. She says, "Every time I finish, I think, that's it, I'm done, I'm moving on to another chapter." And then you have a conversation with someone and they have a wonderful idea and they ask you something that is really weird and impossible and you think, oh, okay. Cate Blanchett, welcome to Desert Island Discs.
Thank you.
So, Cate, how important is music to you? You've played a version of Bob Dylan and now you're in a film about a conductor.
It's often the starting point for me when I'm thinking about a role or an atmosphere that you're stepping into as an actor, because it obviously bypasses language and it's a conduit for memory and non-linear connections or strange left-of-field associations you might sort of give birth to when you're thinking about a role. But having 4 children, I think in the last 15 years, the constant cacophony of being a mother of 4 children, music had sort of left my life a little bit and had been associated with work. And now that they're locking themselves in the room and talking to their girlfriends, it's come back into my life. And it did in a powerful way when I played this role in Todd Field's film Tar. I was playing the principal conductor of a world-renowned German orchestra and standing in front of the Dresden Philharmonie playing Mahler.
Yeah.
It powerfully re-entered my life.
It is extraordinarily powerful, the new film. Tell me a little bit about her ability to conduct and having to learn that. Where did you turn for inspiration?
To the music. It's a mercurial art form. It's when you see a conductor from the audience, they always look slightly arrhythmic, or you think, are you a musician? Because you seem to be so out of time with what the orchestra is playing. But of course, it's obvious. Wasn't obvious to me, though, being a layperson and not being a musician, is that they're always ahead of a breath ahead of the orchestra. Obviously, preparing for the role, I listened to every single recording and watched every single rehearsal of every single Mahler symphony I could get my hand on. And they all sound different, of course, in subtle ways, but it's because of the presence of the conductor and what they choose to focus on in the music. So, but me, I guess I'm more of a dancer than I am a musician.
Well, Cate, we've been talking about music. I think we'd better hear some. It's time for your first disc. What have you chosen and why?
Well, it's from Mahler's Fifth, which is very much at the heart of the film. I'd always loved it. And it seems like such an obvious choice because it's so beloved by the general public, and the Adagietto specifically is constantly played and so claimed by Death in Venice. It's a rehearsal movie, so we were rehearsing it. I wouldn't ever say I was a musician, but the second movement was the most electrifying to play. It's so dynamic, it's so full of emotional extremes. And when we think about the fifth, we think about loss, but we also forget the joy and the exhilaration of young love. And that's what I really felt. It's so dynamic. Part of the second movement from Mahler's Fifth Symphony, played by the Berlin Philharmonic
conducted by Claudio Abbado. So, Kate, let's go back to your early days, if you don't mind. You're the middle child, born in Melbourne, Australia, to June and Robert. Were you the kind of kid who was always in the dressing up box, always making up stories?
I was always in the dressing up box with my sister. And we had this game where she would dress me up, shove me in front of the mirror and give me a name, and then I had to inhabit that character. But I was mostly sort of outside or on the piano.
Tell me about your parents, June and Robert, Kate. Were they creative people? Your dad was in advertising, I think.
Yes, my dad had a rather rough childhood on the streets of various towns in Texas. It was a childhood of neglect, and he died at a very young age when he was about to turn 41.
You were 10?
Yeah, I was 10, yeah. He was in the Navy, actually, and he was in the Antarctic, decided to be a Unitarian minister, and his ship broke down. It was in the US Navy in a Melbourne port, and my mother was a teacher, and she went down to the port with some friends to find some men to come to their teacher's dance, and he happened to be one of them, and they danced all night, and they corresponded for a couple of years, and then he came back to Australia and they decided to get hitched.
It sounds like quite a love story.
It was.
When you think back, how do you remember them together, your mum and dad?
There's a lot of dancing in my house, a lot of music actually, and it became quite silent after my dad died. And I actually remember the last time I saw him, I was playing the piano and he was going off to work. He was in advertising, and I waved goodbye and I stayed at the piano, and then we went out to see the Muppet movie. And I loved the Muppets. I love them so much. I still do. Jim Henson was an absolute genius. And then before the Muppet movie came up, it flashed on the bottom of the screen, could Mrs. Blanchett please come and see the manager? And she did. And I realised later that day that my father had had a fatal heart attack. So, of course, we didn't go back and see the Muppet movie. I was thinking about it the other day, obviously playing the piano again after so long and promising myself I was going to go back and pick it up again, is that I loved it so much. And I think I stopped pretty much soon. I just didn't go back to it. And I wonder now, as I put myself on the couch, I wonder if it was because I associated it with the guilt of not getting up from the piano and kissing him goodbye. You know, you always think about those things, don't you? And strangely, I didn't think about it until I'd actually sat down at the piano. My husband bought me a piano for my 50th birthday, and I went, I'm going to play again. And suddenly all of these memories come flooding back. Your relationships to instruments are so kind of unconscious in a way, I think.
Your second choice. What are we going to hear?
This was an album that my dad had, and it was played a lot, and I would always put it on and think of him. It's called Bésame Mucho. He grew up near the border of Mexico, and so it really reminds me of him.
Bésame, bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. Bésame, bésame mucho, que tengo miedo perderte después.
Bésame Mucho by Trio Los Panchos, bringing back memories, Cate Blanchett, of your parents dancing together. Losing your dad must have been incredibly hard on your mum, of course, and still with 3 children to bring up, and you were just 10. How did you manage?
I got to the hospital and someone who worked with my father, my mother went off to they had to turn off the life support, so she left the room. And this man who was so well-intentioned sat us all down and said, "This is very difficult for your mother. You have to be very, very good." And it's so strange. It made me think about how short life was and how much you wanted to cram into it, but also that sense of living your life not just for yourself, but for other people.
You internalised that?
Yeah, of course it was difficult for my mum. We had this little box in the pantry and it had sort of 9 slots and had a little picture above every slot that said milk, electricity, water, and it was a coin slot and it had sundries. And some weeks you'd open the box and there were only a few brown coins in each of those things and you think, okay, so I better not waste. I'm not going to have this week.
No sundries this week.
Yeah, yeah.
Were you the kind of kid who went up for all the parts in school plays, and did you get them?
Well, all the parts in the school plays that were organised by the teachers sort of went to the girls that were really confident, popular, good at sport. And I was not that. So the first role I got in the organised school play was the fellow who shot Smaug down in The Hobbit. So I had one line and I got to shoot a bow and arrow. It was the last dramatic moment in the play. And then I also was a statue in the Chronicles of Narnia, and I'd practiced my position for so long. I was in white lycra, which no one looks good at, particularly as an adolescent girl. And the stage manager cued us late, and so I was climbing up on the rostrum, and I had this beautiful pose planned, and I didn't have time to turn around, so all the audience saw was my bum. It was, so I got a laugh, which was, I realised, okay, and so I lent into that. But I also realised that, the teachers didn't know what to do with me. So then I, started organising plays with other girls and we did it ourselves. But for fun, not to get anywhere. I think probably the most important creative outlet for me was when I finally got up the courage to audition for the choir. The music school was massive at my school, and there was a choir of probably about 140 girls, and this formidable hurricane of a musician, Jane Elton Brown, who was absolutely terrifying, ran the music school and conducted the choir. I auditioned for her, so she played, the arpeggios and started down low, and she looked at me, she kept going up higher, and she stopped. She took off her glasses and she said, "You have a 3-octave range, girl." And so I got into the choir, and I think it was the place where I realised the power of the ensemble, that you were making music together. So when we sang in an unaccompanied way, it was really electrifying. And I realised, she taught me the power of making beautiful sounds together, and the rigour and discipline that you needed to make something sound or appear effortless. She was really incredible.
May it be an evening star shines down upon you. May it be when darkness falls, your heart will be true. You walk
Kate, it's time for your next piece of music. Disc number 3. What have you got?
What is it? I haven't got my glasses on. Oh, it's the Pilgrim's Chorus. Yes, well, I got to sing this in the choir at school with Jane Elton Brown in a hideous blue dress. I hope they've changed the dresses. At the Melbourne Festival Hall, I think it was. And it was one of the most transporting experiences of my life. Every time I listen to it, I weep with joy.
The Pilgrim's Chorus from Tannhäuser by Wagner, performed by the Norman Luboff Choir and the New Symphony Orchestra of London, conducted by Leopold Stokowski. So, Kate, you didn't go straight to drama college after leaving school. You enrolled on a degree course, and it was economics and fine arts, I think, at Melbourne University. What was the plan for you back then? What had you decided you were going to do?
Well, the wonderful thing then is you didn't really have to have a plan when you went to university. I thought I would go into gallery curation because I thought, well, I didn't have enough skill to be a painter. I'm not really a dancer. You can't be an actor. That's not something you do with your life. And the only thing I thought I wanted to do was travel with my work. But I thought I'll go to university and work out what that work actually
So this is it, because economics and fine arts, it sounds like it's creative, but it's also sensible. I'll be able to make a living. So you would kind of hope to get closer to the stuff that made you feel alive.
I think I wanted to get to international relations, to the political end of economics, the social end of economics.
Okay.
I had a great time at university, and then I took a year off. Travelled. I came back and was in a play in the student union, and someone who was in the play who didn't particularly like me and probably wanted me to leave Melbourne suggested I go to drama school.
And that was what you did. You enrolled at the National Institute of Dramatic Arts in Sydney. What kind of roles were you getting?
Well, the wonderful thing about drama school is you kind of get all sorts, don't you? I played Rosalind and As You Like It and Viola and Twelfth Night and Electra in my final year.
And your first job out of drama school was as a script reader for a casting agent.
Oh, yes, it was. Liz Mulliner.
Did you learn a lot doing that?
I didn't work when I first left drama school, and she had seen me throughout the course of, the productions I'd done there and really believed in me. So she brought me in as a reader to read opposite people in their auditions. And it was extraordinary from an anthropological perspective, but also from a work perspective. You realise the energy, the way people walked into the room, they'd got the job or not. But I also realised when they left the room that whether you got the job or not wasn't entirely dependent upon what you'd done. It wasn't personal.
Was that liberating?
It was really liberating, and I think it allowed me to have a bit more devil-may-care attitude when, in fact, I eventually got an audition myself.
It's time for your fourth choice today, Kate. What have you gone for?
Oh, this is a song by Nick Cave, a fellow Melburnian. I grew up with Nick, not literally grew up with Nick, but, going to listen to him play in St Kilda at the Esplanade and the Prince of Wales, the POW. He's been a huge influence on me, I think. We finally ended up in the same seaside town here, and that's where we met. It's been important to my understanding of what's been possible because he's constantly evolving. He's not frightened at being at the eye of the storm. He's not frightened of the brutality of being alive, but he's also so alive to moments of beauty. And I think that these walls of sound that he is creating, lately with Warren Ellis is, I find, so profoundly moving. I mean, talk about being inside a Turner painting. I really feel that that's where he creatively lives. And this particular piece of music, he's had so many bands, but this is from Grinder Man.
We done our thing.
We have evolved. We're up on our hind legs. The problem's solved. We are artists. We are mathematicians. Some of us hold extremely high positions.
Nick Cave, Grinder Man and Go Tell the Women. So, Cate Blanchett, you were winning all sorts of awards for your theatre work. Then in 1997, you were cast in your first leading film role opposite Ralph Fiennes in Oscar and Lucinda. What were the main differences between inhabiting a character on stage and on camera?
I realised that, obviously if you're lucky in the theatre, you get 5 weeks rehearsal. If you're lucky in a film, you might get 5 takes. And so what you have to do is you have to rehearse with each take like you would each week. But also what I realised very quickly too is that what you do, in the first read-through of a play, is that you'll all make this collective discovery and you go, oh, this is going to be amazing. And then by week 3, you're all weeping, thinking this is a disaster. And then you re-find it so you can repeat it. But of course, what film captures is that moment of discovery, which is really exciting.
Your international breakthrough arrived barely 5 years after graduating, Kate. You took on the role of Elizabeth I. Now, you've played her twice and are actually the first actor to be Oscar-nominated both times when reprising a role. What research did you do when preparing to play her?
Well, I went to the British Library. There were many sort of examples of her handwriting on various documents, and watching her handwriting change from the letter that she wrote to her brother to beg for her life when she was imprisoned to a document she was writing to a French ambassador when she was very sort of late in her life, and watching the handwriting become increasingly shaky, I understood something that I can't even put into words. I could say it was kind of the length of her reign, the amount of personal sacrifice that she'd had to make. And then I started to think about everything that had gone on under her when she was on the throne. And then I saw a picture of the red dress that she wore in Parliament. And it was photographed from all angles. And in the back, which of course wouldn't be seen by the public, you could see how it was let out as her body changed. And so I realised, in fact, it was the difference between what she was presenting to the public and what was actually happening to her body.
You will leave my presence, sir. Go back to your rat hole. Tell Philip I fear neither him, nor his priests, nor his armies. Tell him if he wants to shake his little fist at us, we're ready to give him such a bite he'll wish he'd kept his hand in his pockets.
You see a leaf fall, and you think you know which way the wind blows. Well, there is a wind coming, madam, that will sweep away your pride.
I too can command the wind, sir! I have a hurricane in me that will strip Spain bare if you dare to try me!
Another real person that you played was a version of Bob Dylan, actually a pretty unreal person, Jude Quinn in Todd Haynes' I'm Not There. So 6 different actors with their own portrayals of Dylan: Heath Ledger, Richard Gere, Ben Whishaw and you. How did you approach playing a man? Was it different?
I played him at the time when he went electric, when he was really giving the finger to the audience and saying, I'm not a folk singer, I'm going to do this. I think I started with the reaction of the audience to him when he made that transition. But playing a man, was it a man or was it a sort of a musical force? You realise that in that particular film that the character was made up of many different parts. A friend of mine who's a makeup artist said to me a few days into the shoot, she went, put a sock down your pants. I said, what? She said, you're on the bed, put a sock down your pants. And I went, oh, okay. And I did, and I didn't look back.
It helped.
Yeah, it absolutely helped.
I'm pressing on. I'm pressing on to the higher calling of my Lord. I'm pressing on. I keep pressing on. Yes, I'm pressing on to the higher calling of my Lord.
All right, Kate, it's time for some more music. Your 5th selection. What are we going to hear?
This is a song I definitely have to take to a deadline. It's by a band called I Am Clute, and it's called Proof. And I can't tell you why, but it's just become my song with my husband. And I think because we were travelling so much in the early years of our relationship, and then with our kids, we were always travelling, and it was so painful being apart, even for an hour, for a day, for a week. It's just this strange little song, and my kids have taken it over. So whenever things, get tense at home and someone hasn't done their homework or taken the garbage out, the kids will put this song on and everything falls away and everyone just starts dancing.
Swell, we're living in a hotel. Someone's ringing my bell in a room without a view. And hey, heard you read another book. Should I take another look? Who am I without you?
I Am Clute and Proof, Cate Blanchett, for your husband Andrew Upton. So in 2008, you and he returned to Australia to be co-CEOs and artistic directors of the Sydney Theatre Company. It was a move that surprised some people in the film industry at the time. What were you looking for creatively at that point in your life?
I don't know that I was conscious of what I was looking for creatively. It was just an opportunity that was presented to Andrew, actually, and then he asked if we wanted to do it together. The only thing that would have stopped me doing it was fear. But of course, it seemed like to a lot of people in the film industry, in your late 30s, deciding to go back and run a theatre company.
Also 2007, you were up for 2 different Oscars for 2 different roles. I mean, you were right in the swing of it.
It's a very magnetic country, Australia. I mean, a lot of people leave. Your biggest fear in Australia is that you're going to get in the back of a taxi and someone is going to ask you what you do, and you're going to have to tell them you're an actor, and they're going to ask you what you've been in, and they won't have seen it, or you're a writer or you're a painter. Being an artist in Australia is quite a brutal experience, but maybe that's why it makes us really robust and curious.
A brutal experience in the way that you have to kind of justify it, do you?
Yes, we don't really appreciate what we've got culturally in Australia. I mean, oftentimes we don't really admire it or revere it or consume it. It's a terrible word for culture, consuming culture, until it's been exported and re-imported.
Kate, in 2014, you won your 2nd Oscar for your performance as Jasmine Francis in the film Blue Jasmine. Now, in your acceptance speech at the time, you said that films with women as lead characters shouldn't be considered niche, that they do make money, people do want to go and see them. Do you think things have improved since then?
at the time that I said that, stories with women at their centre were still referred to as women's films, as if a female experience couldn't be a human experience. And often there would be an extraordinary life that was turned into a film with a female at the centre, but the story around them didn't support the weight of the life, so it became what's called a biopic. Whereas if you make Oliver Stone makes a film about JFK, he's making it about something, so that you're part of something. And I think that has really changed. Obviously, there are many more female writers and female producers. I still think that the male-to-female ratio of crew members on set needs to be addressed. And I think it's stopped being talked about like it's a fashionable thing, which is a big advance. But one does feel, particularly in the American film industry, that you do need to keep this, unfortunately, politicised, particularly when the Equal Rights Amendment still hasn't been ratified.
It's time for your next disc, Kate. What's your choice number 6? What are we going to hear?
This is Blow the Wind Southerly by Kathleen Ferrier. One of the great voices. I mean, I think if I was on a desert island, I think something I would profoundly miss would be the human voice. And I remember seeing Terence Davies' film The Long Day Closes, and this was the last track that was played, and it was the first time I heard her voice, and I was completely transported.
Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow the wind south o'er the bonny blue sea. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow, bonny breeze, my lover to me. They told me last night there were ships in the offing, and I hurried down to the deep rolling sea. But my eye could not see it, wherever might be it, the bark that is bearing my lover to me.
Kathleen Ferrier and Blow the Wind Southerly. Cate Blanchett, another award-winning role of yours, this time on the small screen, was playing Phyllis Schlafly, the conservative activist who was opposed to the Equal Rights Amendment in 1970s America. You were also a producer on the series in which you played her, Mrs. America. What was the appeal of playing someone who was coming from such a different perspective to you?
I was in the States filming when, in the final death throes of the election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And I'd heard about this woman called Phyllis Schlafly, and no one can pronounce her name, me included, but I couldn't work out why Trump was trucking her out. This little old lady, who seemed very benign, was being trucked out on the campaign trail, and he was there at her funeral. I thought, who is this woman, and why has she got such a central role in the Republican Party? And so I started doing a bit of research, and then the people who were thinking about putting Mrs. America on the screen and dealing with the Equal Rights Amendment approached me and asked me to play her. And of course then the research began. She was a kingmaker. She was instrumental in stopping the Equal Rights Amendment, which would enshrine the rights of people irrespective of their gender, irrespective of their sex. They couldn't be discriminated against in the American Constitution. She was instrumental in stopping that happening. And she was also instrumental, I think, in laying the foundations for the Republican Party and conservative politics as we understand it now.
Kate, we've got to make some time for the music. It's your 7th disc today.
Well, this is a piece that I came across, Molly Drake, Little Weaver Bird. And when we were making Mrs. America, we were thinking about how to close out the series, and it was ended with an image of Phyllis Schlafly finally putting on an apron and sitting down to make an apple pie. And I'd heard Molly Drake's music, which was so private. She was making music inside her home, for herself, really. Because, I mean, apart from her husband recording a few discs, it wasn't really recorded and certainly not heard by anyone outside her family circle. She gives me quiet courage, in the times when you're making something where you think, this is just for me and maybe one day I can share it with other people.
Little weaver bird sitting sadly in the tree, take my good advice and forget your misery. Your tears are all in vain, and regret can be absurd. Little weaver bird, get weaving.
Molly Drake and The Little Weaver Bird. So Cate Blanchett, a very successful career on film, stage and TV. I said at the top of the programme, that you describing the appeal of a wonderful idea that is impossible, and then you're hooked. What are you looking for when your agent sends you another script for you to flip through?
It used to be different before I had children, but the first question, it's a very banal one. I say, when are they shooting and how long for? It used to be, who's directing? But that still, of course, is the first question, really. I mean, those two are parallel questions. I love what I do. But, if there's only so many hours in a day and there's a lot of competing needs. I mean, you don't have to have children to have competing needs, but it's the practical versus the inspirational, I think.
So, Kate, it's almost time to cast you away now. Your diary's going to be empty. No more demands on your time. No more filming schedules. A solitary life on the island beckons. How do you feel about the prospect?
Listening to Kathleen Ferrier, I could imagine there'd be the other people over there and long for them and think about them and make them present. But I would have time, which is, I guess I'd be trying to be positive about. And what would I do with it? Grow vegetables?
Are you practical? Could you fend for yourself, build a shelter, sow some veg if you needed to?
I'm trying. And that was our lockdown enterprise, as we restored a derelict greenhouse in our back garden. So my beetroot are good. My cauliflower...
That's a good start.
Broccoli, not so great.
Not very deserty, desert island.
No. But I suppose it depends which hemisphere.
I suppose we'll see which seeds blow in on the wind, yes. Kate. For now, we'll have one more disc before you go. What's your final choice today?
It's Count Basie and his orchestra playing Little Darling. And this came back into my consciousness because it was Todd Field put it in Tar. My character is dancing with her wife and to try and calm her down. And this is about 60 beats a minute, which of course is a very calm and romantic and thoughtful place to be. And I played it to my mum because she wanted to hear it because she'd seen the film and said, "What's that piece of music?" And she just started moving again. And we danced together in the kitchen the other night, which is a really strong memory from my childhood of dancing with my mum to various jazz recordings. And it's a sweet memory, and it's a really beautiful piece of music.
Lil Darling, Count Basie and his orchestra. Cate Blanchett, it's time to cast you away. You have the Bible and the complete works of Shakespeare to keep you company. You can have another book too. What would you like?
Gosh, there's so many I haven't read. But I think, ultimately, the thing that would be hardest to maintain if you were by yourself on a desert island would be hope. And a writer I've been delving into a lot lately has been Rebecca Solnit, particularly over the pandemic, because she talks about hope as a gift that you don't have to surrender. I think she refers to it as a power that you don't have to give away. And so she's a strong advocate for hope in the face of climate catastrophe, in the face of monumental abuses of human rights, that we do have the ability to hope collectively and act collectively. And so I find her writing really inspiring.
Is there a particular collection of hers, or would you just like the biggest one we can find?
It's probably her book, Hope in the Dark, while we're talking about hope.
Wonderful. You can also have a luxury item. What will that be?
God. I don't know. I do like peanuts, but I think it would be time if that's not too abstract. I'd love to know what having that long, elastic, unbounded sense of time would be and what I would fill it with. I mean, that would be the biggest surprise.
I guess the only question is how much you would like. Shall I just say as much as you need?
As much time as I need, in the hope that I would one day be rescued.
Well, I love the idea of that, Kate. It is yours. I also have to ask you maybe the most difficult question of all. If you had to rush to save just one disc from the waves out of that you've chosen today, what would you go for?
In the end, I'd have to say the Pilgrim's Chorus because it contains the longing for my family as well.
Cate Blanchett, thank you very much for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.